So this is a continuing thought about Vanguard that I've had, and it actually concerns a lesser known portion of the game, Legion. So for just in case for those who are newer players who don't necessarily know a lot about Legion, um, they refer to a grade 3 and a corresponding grade 2, where you take once per game per ride. So when you re-ride, you reset. Take 4 cards out of your drop zone, shuffle them back into your deck, and search for the specific mate and place it on the Vanguard circle as a Legion mate. Now, this had a lot of people have been kind of bashing it for not only being kind of like a very hard necessary. I don't know if it was a very hard format. It was definitely a very short format, as it really only had 2 sets of actual support, and then it kind of just dropped off with a little bit of support in every now and then in packs. Like Mega Colony got a couple of things, Angel Feather got a couple of things. They also did release some grade 3 Legion mates specifically, as opposed to being a grade 3 and a grade 2, which was the normal thing. And my personal perspective is that V was actually worse than Legion, because V actively had way more advantages over Legion. First one, Legion only had 2 box sets in total. That was BT16 and BT17, with, again, little bits and pieces of support, but nothing extremely game breaking to make Legion actively more playable. V had 12 with some box sets, with some extra boosters. I think so. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and say 10, around 10 different boxes as spares. No, actually, I think it might have been a total of 15, including the Bermuda stuff. But again, my math may not be right. If someone wants to check that and say you're wrong, thank you in advance. But I would like to point out that that means that V had multiple box sets and they actively screwed it over. Legion, I feel like, never really had a chance to shine in that sense. They only had, like I said, they only had 2 major box sets, and then after that we got Stride, and Stride kind of took over everything. Why would you play a Legion deck that requires you to have both people be at grade 3, as opposed to Stride, where it's the same case, but you had other options. The second thing was that Legion came at a time when PGs were incredibly expensive. So a good example of this, once again, I will point out Gus Jin for Granblue. This was a PG that only was released 1 copy in BTO2, so the second set that they ever released. And as of what I can remember, Granblue was the clan that had the longest standing of only having 1 PG. Meanwhile, they reprinted Gold Paladin. They reprinted, I believe, Royal Paladin, Kagero, I don't know if it was Kagero necessarily, but definitely Narukami. I know that they actively did release a bunch of named PGs for a lot of the clans. I have a pretty good recollection that they did not release anything for Granblue. So from BT02, the second set, up until it was the Granblue trial deck, as well as GBT06. So that was a good 21 sets where Granblue had to either work with an extremely expensive PG. I do remember probably during either Legion, or I think it was specifically during Legion and Stride, the beginning of Stride, that Gus Jin was at the very least $35 a piece, and the highest I think I remember it fluctuating around the $40 to $45 mark. So if you wanted a full play set, you were actually paying as much for maybe a new Stride deck than you were for those cards. But and then it's the same thing with a lot of the other PGs, like Royal Paladins. Even with the Seeker PG, you had Isolt, Gem Knight Azult or Dual Knight Azult, and then the Seeker PG. Those were still going for anywhere from $12 to $20 a piece. Um, I think it was Kagero where we had, I think it was Bari, Seal Dragons, and then we actually did have a Perdition one, but again, that was the same kind of maybe 12 to 20. Aquaforce still had Pascal and then the new Blue Storm, and again, that was still like 12 to 20. A lot of the PGs were still very, very expensive during that time. And then during V, we automatically said that, oh, we're giving each clan a not only a basic PG, but we're also giving them a trigger PG. So they had way more options for the PGs, and yet they still had to make worse ban lists. They still had to ban certain things. They still had to make an emergency ban. So I do personally ask the question, what would have happened if Legion went further? Would it actually have been bad for the format, or was 2 boxes enough to say that this is a horrible portion? And so I think of it as I actually did originally love playing Legion because I did like the aspect of when do I use the effect? When do I try and push forward? Whereas now it's kind of like first stride, oh, game over. Or even stride was like first stride, second stride, game over. You could legitimately keep going with Legion just because you could keep shuffling all your heal triggers back into your deck, or you could choose to shuffle your crits back into your deck for more focus on that if you had no heals in drop. Um, Another thing that I would like to point out also with the Legion is that a lot of decks did not actively get specific cards for them. So, like a good example was Metalborgs. Metalborgs did not get, they got a Quintat wall, but they did not get their own PG. And I find it interesting how we've given Metalborgs plenty of support in recent packs, especially in some of the other packs. Granted, it's not the high-end support, but it's still support. But we've given Enigman a burst PG, but we've given Metalborgs nothing. And I do think that that's a very interesting open fact. So I do. I'll summarize my feelings this way. I do feel like Legion, in and of itself, was a undervalued, um, undervalued format that actively could have been better. I will also say that if you compare Legion to the V formats for markers, I still feel like Legion was actually more valuable because it actively didn't. It actually gave you a reason to go second. Whereas with V, you're just getting something for riding. It's an auto thing. And with the fact that a lot of Excel decks after Excel 2 were topping formats, it was a questionable thing as to what they were trying to do with balancing because I can see I think I saw thought of it as they had Protect as the best, so they gave Protect a weaker marker, and Excel was doing the worst, so they gave Excel the best marker. But even then I questioned like why. Um so also what I actually did eventually make a list of some of the decks that I saw, and a good amount of the ones that could have actively gotten support were from Legion. You had no strides for Seekers. You had no strides for Perdition, aside from the one Perdition that you got in the Kai Legend deck. You got basically what it is you got a bunch of things that really, you had a bunch of decks that really could have used more support. And we have gotten support. We got a good amount of support from Musketeers. I do know that Jewel Knights eventually got some kind of support along with a grade 2 that was a promo grade 2 that's like $60-$50 a piece. But again, this is one of those cases where Bushiroad took their own ideas and then portrayed it as this says we think of this as the biggest mistake we've done. Let's ignore it, try and ignore it. But I do feel like they could have tried something new with it, even at the end of G, where they could have brought it back. Another thing to note is that for the anime specifically, the Legion arc is essentially nothing but filler. So it's kind of like a gap between the end of the Link Joker arc beating Glendios and the beginning of Stride. But there are moments when I feel like there could have been more to it that could have actually made it canon. But that's for another video. Thanks for listening.